Comida sesiún poibli. Egan thrasa agus noi hafaltu mar rov agus is seachna gaelge an seachna shugs and seachna shuchoing so iramarv mas féidir cúpla focail gaeling a úsáid cúpla focail gaelge úsáid le ling a chruinniuinniuh dynamid mórmhór nó mars gnách is tócha i méle ach tá Belog chur a timpe le cúpla focail in gaeling gur féidir a úsáid le ling or spóracht agus ar chuig cainte in nómh. Colleagues, we're in public session and it is seachna gaeilge, so I ask you, insofar as you can, to use cúpla focail during our meeting today. And before we begin, I need to bring to your attention, as I do every week, the note on privilege. So our witnesses that are giving evidence from within the parliamentary precincts are protected by absolute privilege in respect to the evidence that you give to the committee. That means that you have a full defence in any defamation action for anything said at a committee meeting. However, witnesses are expected not to abuse this privilege and may be directed to cease giving evidence on an issue of my direction as chair, and witnesses should follow that direction and are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that, as is reasonable, no adverse commentary should be made as against an identifiable third person or entity. Privilege against defamation does not apply to the publication by you outside of the proceedings held by the committee of any matters arising from these proceedings. And to our members, I'd like to advise and remind you of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of Leinster House in order to participate in public meetings, and I will not permit a member to participate where they are not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, a member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting. I would ask any member that's partaking via Microsoft Teams that prior to making their contribution to the meeting, you confirm that you're on the grounds of Leinster House campus. Members are also reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you will be directed to discontinue remarks, and it's imperative that you comply with any such direction. The agenda for today's meeting is the Sea Fisheries Protection Legal and Legislative Frameworks for the SFPA. This is part of a series of meetings on the topic of sea fisheries protection that is feeding into a report that Deputy McLaughlin is rapporteur. And we are joined by Minister of State of the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Mr. Timmy Dooley Tachtadala, and the Minister is joined by officials from his department, Ms. Anna O'Sullivan, Principal Officer, and Mr. Donald King, Assistant Principal Officer. And I remind members that while the Minister of State may call on his officials to speak briefly for clarification purposes during the meeting, where a specific or technical point arises, the Minister of State is the witness, whereas the officials are not, and officials can clarify issues for the committee, but any follow-up questions from members should be put to the Minister of State directly, as he is the accountable person before the committee. And the opening statement, I'd ask you, Minister, to read the opening statement to the meeting, and then we will go to questions and answers.
Mágat a chéile tá mé lán sásta bheithan seo ag caint leis an SFPA inniu. The government fully recognises the critical importance of maintaining a vibrant fishing sector. The programme for government securing Ireland's future reflects this approach by committing to securing a sustainable future for the fisheries sector while supporting coastal communities that rely on this important activity for their livelihood. Since my appointment 12 months ago, I've travelled widely and I've engaged with stakeholders across the industry. I know there is a considerable level of frustration currently with the enforcement practices and the legislation underpinning same. There is a view that the current system whereby offences are dealt with under the Criminal Justice Act is disproportionate. I also hear that the sanctions with penalty points is fine, but is not harmonised with the rest of Europe. We do not have a harmonised system of penalty points, as I understand it, across the EU. I very much welcome the initiative of this committee under the rapporteurship of Deputy McLaughlin to form a report which I assume will be published and circulated in due course. And I want to participate, obviously, in that work insofar as I can. The SFPA's vision is to be a trusted regulator that promotes and verifies compliance, supporting sustainability in Ireland's sea fisheries and seafood sector in a fair, proportionate and transparent way, and where necessary, enforcing national and EU sea fisheries and seafood safety laws effectively. This means the fair regulation of all fishing vessels operating within Ireland's 200-mile limit and Irish fishing vessels wherever they operate, and all seafood production in Ireland. I know that as Minister of State with responsibility for this area, I am precluded by statute from getting involved in operational matters, including in relation to sea fisheries law enforcement. Section 68(1) of the 2006 Act provides that the SFPA is accountable to the Committee of Public Accounts regarding the regulatory and financial transactions, the efficiency of resource use and the evaluation of operational effectiveness. Section 68(2) provides that the SFPA shall account to your committee, Chair, for the performance of its functions and I quote specifically, shall have regard to any recommendations relevant to its functions. And I've no doubt that you will incorporate that into your report. The consistent message, though, I am hearing from all my industry engagements is that they all want to see a fair and strong control framework, which is a key element of protecting fish stocks on which our seafood sector so importantly depends. Now, while the SFPA is independent in the exercise of its functions, it has, under Section 48 of the 2006 Act, which established the SFPA Consultative Committee, and again I quote, for the purposes of consultation and liaison with the sea fisheries and seafood sectors and other relevant interests on matters relating to the functions of the SFPA. I understand that the committee is a very good structure, but it needs to be more than just a one-way conduit for information flow. I've met almost all of the 14 committee members who are, I believe, excellent representatives, all of them, and they understand the industry and its challenges. Our department is committed to ensuring state bodies under its aegis achieve the highest possible standards of corporate governance. We work closely with SFPA to ensure good governance in meeting its objectives, and this includes confirming that the SFPA complies with the Depender Code of Practice. The SFPA's budget has developed in recent years to reflect new requirements in fisheries control, beyond funding for capital projects to ensure that the agency's ability to meet its existing objectives. SFPA has embarked on an ambitious programme of digitisation. The SFPA will implement a new digital inspection service in 2026 and will continue to develop new resources to meet requirements under the revised control regulation. In terms of the SFPA's legislative framework, one important element in the EU Fisheries Control Regulation, which provides for a union fisheries control system for ensuring compliance with the rules of the Common Fisheries Policy and establishing a level playing field across the EU on fisheries control. The current control regulation entered into force in January 24 and updates and amends the previous 2009 control regulation. Our department is working with the SFPA and other relevant departments and agencies to introduce the required measures to implement at national level the relevant provisions of the updated control regulation. I wish to advise the committee that I intend to carry out an independent evaluation of the 2006 Act in the near future. Specific terms of reference will first be drafted to set the parameters of the evaluation, and I would welcome the committee's input to this phase of the work. Specifically, I believe we need to address this consistently raised issue that the Act requires criminal sanctions for minor infringements rather than administrative sanctions. It is also time to evaluate the governance and oversight provisions of the SFPA in the Act, and the committee's input would be helpful in this regard. I want to make it clear that in my desire to review the Act, it in no way casts any aspersions on the implementation of the law currently by the SFPA, and I have full confidence in the SFPA as it's currently implementing the Act. So it's the Act that I want to review in that regard. The SFPA completed an organisational capacity review in 2020. PwC was commissioned to undertake a capability review of the SFPA, focusing on identifying actions which are necessary to strengthen the organisation in order to operate more efficiently and effectively. The review report was published by the SFPA in April 2020 and includes a total of 46 recommendations. Following the publication of the report, the Department nominated a 3-person independent advisory board with expertise and or professional experience in senior administration, public sector governance requirements and management not related to the sectors regulated by the SFPA to assist the SFPA management in strengthening the capabilities of the organisation. The SFPA has taken significant steps to address the report's recommendations through the appointment of an independent advisory board and the appointment of a director of transformation. The implementation of these recommendations was completed, I believe, in 2023, and the SFPA's current strategy integrates these recommendations. Additionally, our department has provided significant additional resources to the authority in recent years to strengthen the organisation and ensure that it delivers to a high standard on its core responsibilities. In conclusion, I am satisfied that the SFPA's current governance and accountability requirement, as I have outlined, is functioning, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss these important matters with the committee today, and I thank the Chair again for the invitation.
Ara Oslomid the question and ish so lever dulcher ver lovasus mas malif kind. We'll open to questions now. Tachta Maxwell, Shach Nomad, 7 minutes.
Okay, Minister, thank you for coming in. And this follows on from, we had the SFPA in here in November, I think it was. And I have to say that day, where they sat, it was very much a case of we don't have to answer the questions under law, and nearly every question was put to them was deflection and verbatim back to us. Well, we don't have to answer that question. Look, I've said it before, from an inland county, didn't know much, but I did go up to Killybegs last summer as the invitation of Senator Boyle here, and I did meet fishermen, met processors, and you know, when you hear their story, and you do all, and I read in, you know, the SFPA saying, you know, when cameras, where is it, members challenge the large. Sorry, once operators bring their factories up to the modern standards, mainly requiring installation of CCT and the other 19 landings can be factory weighed. Well, one of the factories I was in, like, I put it down to, like, if you ever you watch the films about gambling in America Casino, the amount of cameras that were overhead, that were watching down on people, that were looking in from the sides, that were all around the plant. And when you see that fishermen, that week I was up a load of what was the fish that came in Manus that day that was put up through the chute? Blue whiting. And when it was put up through the chute to be sorted, all it was fit for was fish meal, because you can't put it up. So when you hear these stories, this does not instill confidence in the SFPA. Look, we all know the SFPA is needed. It's there to do a job. But when you see that how fishermen are treated, and I suppose this weighing, they take the box at the harbour, and you put your fish in, you weigh it, and then you guesstimate your catch from that box. Like, and if you're out by, I think it's 10%, it's a criminal. You get a prosecution, or you get, you know, it doesn't stack up, Minister. And like that, the day they were here, you would have to look at them and say it was just brazen. You know, like, we don't have to answer your questions, so we're untouchable. That's the impression I got. I only met them for 2.5 hours, and I said in the Dáil last week in a statement, you couldn't like them if you reared them, as an old saying in Mon, and that's in only 2.5 hours of meeting them. So how do fishermen feel who are dealing with this day in, day out? And what other people were saying was, even the ships that are out there that aren't even Irish, but they won't even steam into Killybegs to unload because of the they'll steam all up somewhere else because they feel it's not as strict, and you know. So look, there's a bit of work to be done. We understand we need the SPFA, and but you know, they've lost the room, in my opinion, with fishermen. Now, how we get that back is another thing. And then I think Deputy McLaughlin brought this up, the case, we had heard it, but Deputy McLaughlin had pushed it, and other deputies here the last day, about that fisherman, that the case went on for how many years, and then it was thrown out of court. I read about it. But you see, the feeling I get is the SFPA and other groups, we're a big outfit, we have money behind us, and we'll push it on to the very last. And sure, the case fell, what odds? It's not out of our pocket, but that poor fisherman, probably the financial loss he was at, plus mental, everything. And I get that government bodies, when they want, they can feel they can just take it on for as long, because we've endless pockets, and you know, it was asked, I think, Deputy Gallagher, Deputy Ward, Manus, everybody asked about that court case, and the question was, we can't answer you here, it's moot point. So look, I think that's it, that feeling, I get it, that in other government departments we've endless pockets and we'll put the small man down because either his pocket will run out before ours, and sure, if we lose the case, what odds? Okay, thank you, Minister.
Thanks very much, Deputy, and I appreciate your, like myself, taking the opportunity to inform yourself about matters which may not be germane to your upbringing, and I had to go through the same learning curve, maybe had to do it a bit more quickly, and to thank those, including Senator Boyle, who brought me to Killybegs to see it. There's two important issues here. So from the SFPA's perspective in relation to the investigation and prosecution of a case, so they carry out the investigation under the law that's there. They have put a file together, it goes to the DPP. The DPP ultimately takes the case to the court. So sometimes you're damned if you do or damned if you don't. So I have, you know, we need to put that on the record as well, that the DPP is in the middle of all of that. They are precluded from including any conversation they would have with me about addressing any of the specifics of any case. And whilst we'd always like to know why a case was taken, that doesn't end up in a prosecution. They genuinely wouldn't be in a position. Now, I'm not going to lecture anyone on communication. There's times I get it wrong too in terms of how you might address a committee, but I think because the role of the committee, it's important that any agency coming before a committee would try to elaborate to the greatest extent possible in a general way the issues that they face. And that's not at all to suggest that the SFPA or any agency should breach that fundamental principle which is set out in the law, which is that they can't discuss an individual case. Maybe that needs to be explained a bit more to the committee, and maybe there's an opportunity to do that again. But I am clear that would not be something they could do. The issue, and hopefully it's something that can be reviewed, but it's the consultative committee that currently exists, and I've met representatives of that, and I'd like to see that reviewed as well, because not speaking specifically to the SFPA, but generally there were responses in the past to regulatory gaps that existed, and these regulatory authorities were put in place that didn't have a higher level of oversight, that they were effectively self-regulating. And I'd like to have that as part of the review or the evaluation that I intend to have carried out, to see if that's fit for purpose. Because I think it's good governance generally to go back and look at how legislation works. To your original point, which was about the issue that I raised earlier about the criminal sanctions versus administrative fines. There's been a lot of technological advances in the 20 years since this Act was first enacted in 2006. We're now at 2026. Even more recent developments in terms of artificial intelligence, how all of that can be combined to accurately establish the counting and the weighing of the fish in this case. And I too was found it difficult to understand how somebody could be penalised, and this isn't at all a reflection of the SFPA, it's how the Act works. So it's anything that I say here relates to the work of the Oireachtas rather than the work of the SFPA. How somebody has to guess what they have in the hull of their ship based on certain sampling they take from it. And yet all of that is then transported to a factory where it's all weighed, it's all scrutinised, all that data is captured, and yet when you know at the end what you ultimately had, you somehow can be penalised for what your guesstimate was a day or so earlier.
Thank you, Minister.
That doesn't add up for me, and that's why I want to see it reviewed.
I'll bring in Senator Boyle.
Thanks, Cahirlock, Gora Mayagat, and thanks, Minister, for coming in. First, I suppose, along with my colleague here, David, we had the SFPA, and here Mr Hayes came in, and in fairness, he sat where you sat, and under the legislation, he could give us no answers. So how are we going to change the legislation that we can get answers? I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of that committee meeting, he said he was answerable to us, but yet he didn't answer one question we asked him. So how could we change that, Minister?
Yeah, the evaluation that I intend to commission will look at the effectiveness of the legislation in terms of policing the sector, and I want to look at it in terms. I want the review of the evaluation to look at the sanctions that are meted out for infringements. So where I believe some of the issues that I'm hearing, it won't be for me to prescribe what the ultimate decision of these independent people will be, but it's to address the concerns of the sector that people are being held criminally liable for misdemeanours, some of which may happen without their intention, that happen by virtue of the work that they do, as I've already outlined. I don't believe that it would be appropriate to change the legislation to allow the committee here to prosecute every case, or to try every case, or to retry a case that has already gone through the courts. So I think we, like any police force, I don't think we'd expect any of the Garda Síochána Act to change that if they seek to bring a prosecution or they investigate a case, goes through the DPP, and ultimately it falls, that we'd end up with a situation that would be back before the Justice Committee. So I don't want to give you to believe that that's my intention in terms of this evaluation. My intention is generally to address the sanctions and whether they're fit for purpose, and anything else that may arise. Where I think there may be some potential, and again, what I said in my opening statement was I want to engage with the committee, and I'm conscious that Deputy McLaughlin is already, through the committee, has a rapporteur's report, and maybe some of that will be helpful in guiding the work that we're trying to do here, if there is to be a reform of the legislation. It's very early stages, but I would perhaps see again an opportunity for some oversight, where the committee would not be, or where the SFPA would not necessarily be self-regulating, that there would be a supervisory authority. That's a possibility. I don't want to be prescriptive in terms of what the answers to the evaluation might be, but I think it could be in that space, and maybe the consultative committee might have more might have an oversight role. Again, I don't want to be prescriptive.
But I see where you're coming from, Minister, but you mean at the minute it's ludicrous that a skipper can get a criminal charge by a guesstimate when he's out there fishing. It's pumped into the hold of the ship. He doesn't know exactly what's on. He makes a guesstimate, and if he's out the 10%, he's taken to court. Yeah. To me, that is ludicrous.
No, I've been very taken, just Senator, I've been very taken by that recurring message that I've received in Killybegs, Castletownbere, Dingle, wherever I've been, Galway, no matter who I've met, including representation from nearly everybody around this. Everybody is conscious that we want a regulator that's fit for purpose. We don't want, nor do the fishermen want to go back to the old days either, quite frankly, but they do want to feel that the sanctions are proportionate to the indiscretion in certain circumstances, and we want to ensure that we're not penalising as a state our fishermen in a manner that's not consistent with the application of the control regs across the European Union, and that our fishermen and women are treated exactly the same in a fair and equitable way as
ministers like me and you coming in here, and I get a box of Lego and I throw it out on the floor there, and I tell you to count many red and many blue without, it's exactly the same. And just to move on then from, there's so much CCTV. Minister Hayden was up in Killybegs 2 weeks ago, and to be saying that he's seen CCTV in operation, that's unreal. I mean, why are we being so regulated? At the end of the day, the fish comes into the pier, it's put into the tanker, the SFPA can see it being put into the tanker then. They can follow the tanker the whole way up to the factory, to the fish being produced. It goes through the sampling up there, Everything's on camera. There's nothing being hidden. Why, at the end of the day, can the figures that's done on the factories at the total end of the catch not be acceptable? Can you tell me that now?
Thanks very much, Senator. And again, having seen that firsthand, and I've spoken with Minister Hayden, in fact, on his way back, or maybe it was just while he was there, and he too raised the same issue. And it's for that reason that I want to initiate the evaluation of the law as it stands, to establish if it's fit for purpose in light of the issues that are raised, in light of the advances in technology, particularly cameras and sensors and weighing systems, coupled with advances in artificial intelligence, that, in my view anyway, would seem to suggest that the practices that were necessary when the legislation was drafted may no longer be necessary. But I don't want to prescribe that we can change that without a review of the legislation. Yeah. So for me, the response from a policy perspective is an evaluation of the legislation, and if the determination at the end of that is amending the legislation, well then that's where we go. I want to do that in a collaborative way with this committee, because you meet very regularly, and I think it would be appropriate that we'd work on this together, and I'm committing to collaboration with you in that process.
Next is Deputy Cooney.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Minister, for coming in, and thank you for your opening statement. A question for you, Minister. Has the Fisheries Natural Plan ever been submitted with regard to the impacts of the large-scale removal of forage fish on the blue-nosed dolphins in the Lower River Shannon SAC?
Yeah, it's a matter that's an important one. I don't believe that I have received such a submission, but I'm happy to check that out for you and come back to you. I've recently met with the Whale and Dolphin Group, who have a responsibility in relation to the management of the mammals in that region, and have a very strong role in developing that and in their protection. And I'll happily check with the department to see if we've ever received any submission in relation to that.
And why would you think there wouldn't been a submission put in?
Well, I'd have no idea why a submission would or wouldn't be put in. What I'm saying to you is I don't know whether one has been submitted or not, or in what context it has been submitted, or who has it been submitted. So maybe if you have further information there on it, or if you can tell me perhaps, I mean, obviously you have some information available, so maybe you could let me know if such one has been submitted.
Mm. Yeah. Okay, I can come back to that. And look at as it regards farmers. We've seen farmers who have been screening out slurry tanks for environmental impacts because they are close to Natura site. They'll have to, as we're well aware, they'll have to do the same for the nitrate derogations. Why would such operations as large-scale commercial fishers in the SAC areas not be bound to the same rules, Minister, would you think?
Well, it's a separate issue, but my understanding is that large-scale fishermen are bound to the rules of all of that. No one has raised with me before this that there's an issue in that regard. Now, specifically, maybe you could tell, I mean, are you talking about the processing sector, or is it the fish farms you're talking about?
Both.
Okay. Well, I have, as you know, for a fish farm, they're licensed entities. Some have existing licenses, and some reach a certain point where they have to be reviewed. So when a license is being reviewed, they have to provide all the necessary assessments in line with the location of their farm. So if it's in a Natura designated site, they'll have to submit an application to MARA, and that will be determined based on the various screening that's done and the environmental impact assessments that are necessary. And the licence may or may not be granted based on the assessment of MARA. And then there's an appeals process where the decision would come to the ministry to issue the licence, but that can be objected to if somebody has a view that it has a negative impact, and it goes to an independent appeals board, which is known as ALAB. So there's a strong regulatory regime there in addressing such a concern that somebody might have. So the decision is ultimately taken based on a recommendation to the Minister for the issuance of a licence, and then it's back to it's the Marine Institute and the department that decide on the licence, and so it would come back to the Minister for decision, and ultimately it would, if the decision was not in keeping with the views of those that were objected to it, they could appeal it to the ALAB.
So, Minister, in an SAC area then, should the same rules not apply for everybody?
Well, I think that generally they do. I mean, there's different threats or issues to an area concerned. Like, if there's something specific that you want me to answer, I'll try to answer it.
Well, what I'm saying is there large-scale commercial fishing going on in SAC areas without the same rules as applies to other individuals?
Well, when you say large-scale fishing in an SAC, it's generally, I mean, we introduced the ban on trawlers over 18 metres fishing inside 6 kilometres. Many of the SACs that you referred to are within bays. So there was this year a limit of 2,000 tonnes of sprat in that area. There is still some fishing within those limits by larger vessels for species other than sprat. From next October, that will be eliminated. It will be just to the smaller boats. So I'm not so sure of the impacts that you're referring to. But again, I'm happy to engage with you if you want to maybe submit to me some of your concerns in that regard.
What I'm asking is, does the same rules apply to them then as well that would apply to farmers who have whose screen out slurry tank for environmental impact reasons? Would the same rules apply to both the large-scale commercial fishing trawlers and the farmers?
You see, farmers, and I think what you're referring to would be so the effluent or the runoff from slurry tanks, potential, yes. Right?
Yes.
Now, large-scale fishing and large-scale trawlers, I don't think have the same effluent issues that we're talking about here. So, I mean, I think we're trying to compare apples with oranges. So I'm not so sure what issue you're referring to.
What I'm referring to is, why don't the same rules be there for both?
Well, I think that they're two very different practices, if you don't mind me saying so.
To a certain degree.
So they're two different practices, so I'm not so sure that the same rules apply. But what I'll do is I'll get a note prepared for you that sets out the rules as they relate to the trawling issue, where other than whatever minimal discharges there are in relation to whatever pollutant might come from the diesel engines, my understanding is that the bulk of the trawling is effectively taking the fish on board, that there isn't any discharge back into the water or into the SACs concerned. But I'm happy to get some more information for you on that.
Right. Your time has expired, Deputy. The next two offered was Senator O'Reilly.
And you're very welcome, Minister. I just gone through your statement there, your revised statement that we only got sight of. And I just see you said there is a view that the current system whereby offences are dealt with under the Criminal Justice Act is disproportionate. Do you also share that view? I know there is a view out there, but do you share it?
I'm concerned that the law is not consistent with the reality of the fishing operations today. I believe that the quality of technology or the advances in technology can potentially resolve the issues. So I don't want to make a determination or offer an opinion until I get the expertise and the detailed analysis of what we're at. So as a layman, yes, it's, you know, I can only depend on the information which has been given to me in good faith. But in my role as a Minister of State, I have a different responsibility. So I must have all the evidence. I must have an evaluation done. But you can take it that I have concerns because of the information that has been provided nearly everywhere I go.
Okay. Senator Boyle here beside me tried to just, you know, bring us back to the committee where the SFPA were in front of us and didn't answer any questions. And I just feel you didn't really answer that question. You actually deflected. So in your statement it says, Section 68 provides that the SFPA shall account to your committee, which is us, for the performance of its functions. Now, you kind of deflected in your response to Senator Boyle there by saying it might have been the way that questions were framed or asked of the SFPA. But I actually asked questions to do with not legal cases at all, with the amount of onboard inspections they'd done, with the amount of onboard inspections on non-national boats, and I didn't get those responses. So, in fairness to the committee here, it wasn't just legal questions that there may have been a question over. It was ordinary questions, and we did not receive one single response in that. So how are you going to address that?
Yeah, so I think I did say at a committee previously when I was asked about this particular issue that the SFPA in their carrying out of their functions and their capacity to come before you should be able to speak in general terms without the specifics of any individual case. So if the questions are general, I'm not so sure that there's anything that would preclude them from talking about numbers, statistics in a general way. Maybe that's a change that needs to come about, a change in their interaction with you. And I think perhaps that might be reflected when you get an opportunity in advance of a submission or in advance of the coming before the committee, that they would that you would maybe give them a heads up as to the data that you wanted or the information. I don't see any reason why the SFPA would be precluded from providing you with data, statistics, or general observations in relation to their functioning.
Yeah, the committee was totally disrespected in that regard, I felt, and I don't know how that's going to be resolved, and it has to be resolved. The other thing I want to ask is, there's you say in your statement there that you intend to carry out an independent evaluation of the 2006 Act in the near term. Can you give us a timeline roughly of?
I can. I'd like to have it started within this quarter, the second quarter. I'd like to have it started before June. We've already a significant piece of work underway, which the committee is familiar with, which is the task force to look at the significant loss as a result of our loss of fishing effort due to reduction in quota based on scientific advice. We are a small unit within the department, so I'm conscious that I don't want to overburden an already burdened team, but certainly my intention would be that the work of that task force is due to be completed by the end of June, and I'd like then from then on I'd like to have that evaluation process ready to go as soon as that work is completed.
When?
Before the end of June. I'd like to have it started.
Started and finished?
Well, I don't want to be prescriptive about the time frame until people are appointed and until we have a scope of the terms of reference. And what I want to use, and this is the offer that I made to the committee, over the next number of weeks and working with you to try to define the terms of reference of that piece of work.
Okay.
But it's not a long-winded one. This is meant to be an evaluation of the existing Act. But I don't want to give you a time and then have to come back. But I will when we establish this evaluation.
And when
we'll
will
give
the
it a time
report
frame.
be published?
Well, that'll be at the. I mean, it's difficult for me to give you a time on the publication of the report until such time as we have appointed the group to do the work. But I've given you that I want to have it started before the end of June, and at that stage we will time limit it in the same way as I did with the task force.
Okay, thank you.
Next offering is Deputy Charles Ward.
Minister, I want to thank you for coming in today. So I'm going to start off with the issue surrounding the blue whiting when they were coming in to get getting weighed and basically catching them, and instead of weighing them in the factory according to the SIA, this is a practice can jeopardise quality if they're weighed on if they're not weighed in the factory, so they're handled, they're double handled, and this is absolutely correct because I myself have worked in a factory, a fish factory down Buttonport, and we done roe, and when we done the herring roe, there was a product that went to basically into scrap, as it would go into fish meal and whatever. But blue whiting, a very expensive fish, to treat it like that, you know, then as soon as that fish is weighed, like in the manner it's weighed, it's not fit for human consumption. It's damaged. You know, like we're talking about practices here, and regarding the SFPA and Mr. Hayes that was in, and we had the situation where we were talking about the tower in Killybegs, about the cameras in the tower. I think it was Senator Deputy Maxwell that was telling us about. Asked him a question: was it in the tower in Killybegs? No, it was further on down, but it was still in the tower in Killybegs. It was just situated in the wrong place. And this was the frustration that we had as a committee dealing with the SFPA. And they are under your remit, and I understand that but that performance there was unacceptable. And as people who are genuinely working for the fishing communities in Donegal and all over Ireland, to be treated with the lack of respect there, I found it was just absolutely pathetic, to tell you the truth. So I'm going to get on to my questions here, and part of this is we do tend to criticise the SFPA and their over-the-top regulations enforcement, and it is far stricter than the EU, other EU countries. And the reality is that they're acting under instructions by the government, what the powers given to them by the government, particularly following the 2019 inquiry, right? So there is a level of responsibility, and I know that this is a new role, and it was under the Department of Agriculture and all that before, but there needs to be an attempt, as we see it, and I think everybody can see it, there needs to be a reform of the SFPA, and because we are turning Irish fishermen into criminals when their European counterparts are actually getting away with it. And that is the feel on the ground. We all know it, we all feel it, because when we are talking to the fishermen of Ireland, they are feeling that they're treated as a second-class citizen within their own country. And now they're looking to you, and they're looking to us as a committee to try and change this culture. And I know that the SFPA were brought in to change things, to make things better. But now it seems there's an element now where they are out of control, and they're having a direct effect on the fisheries. So I'll give you a lot there today, just to let you get on.
No, thanks very much, Deputy Ward, and just thank you for your ongoing interest. You raised the issue about blue whiting and the double handling and the impact that it has. Effectively, it takes it from potentially being used for human consumption because it's a very soft species and gets damaged, and I saw that at first hand. And I think that was one of the things that sort of guided me in having views around the evaluation of the law as it stands. Is it entirely necessary to perform secondary and potentially tertiary checks when there's the ultimate system is now there to meet the standard, where just by the one checks with the cameras and the weights and all of that factories? And it was that has motivated me in this regard, and I think we can get beyond that. I'm also taken by particularly Killybegs because of the kind of activities there, but the amount of paperwork that's required to take fish from a boat to the factory a number of hundred metres away or sometimes less. And that's why this whole designation of the port, which has been regularly raised by the acting chair, Deputy McLaughlin, Senator Boyle and others, to get that derogation. Now, I've agreed that needs to be done, but there's a number of steps to get there, and I've asked officials to prepare a pathway for that. And we're working through that. There are a number of issues, I think, in relation to the ownership of certain parts. Some are private, some are public, but to me it shouldn't be a barrier to getting it done. It's a matter of getting it done, and it obviously has to comply with the control regs and all of that. But I think that would help, and it would improve the issue there. So then you talked about the reform of the SFPA. To me, it's the evaluation first of the legislation to establish if it's fit for purpose, and I think everything we're hearing is that it's not. Mm-hmm. It's not as effective as it might be based on advances that have taken place. But I just don't want to determine that or make a determination of that without the independent expertise that would evaluate all what we're trying to achieve, ensure that we're complying with the control regulations, that it's in line with what the Commission expect, that it's ensuring that it protects and preserves our fish stocks, our controls, all of that, but in doing so in a proportionate and as expeditious a way as possible without creating unnecessary burdens, particularly where there's minor infringements that don't impose or don't provide any benefit to the fishermen concerned. And that's really where we need to look at it. So thanks for your questions again.
We now move on to Deputy Vice McLaughlin.
Thanks, Graham Maggart, Cahirla. So in your presentation, Minister, you stated that you're looking at the EU Fisheries Control Regulation and ensuring compliance, and you talk about establishing a level playing field across the EU. So I just want to read to you, this was a post on the Irish Fish Processors and Exporters Association, a post on their Facebook page, and they stated the following: in Ireland, pelagic fish processing is compelled to have the following under requirements placed by EU Commission: standardised weighting equipment with 30 minutes zero outing, all newly installed and paid for by industry, state-of-the-art flow scales across the sector. These weighing systems must be under CCTV that is live fed to the competent authority and retained by each individual processor for 6 months. That is 370,000 hours of CCTV images maintained by Irish processors. We are subject to a sampling plan and weights extrapolation that must be carried out under CCTV. Between landing the fish, weighing the fish and exporting the fish, 14 different sets of documents, declarations, stock returns or electronic transport documents must be filed, filled and returned to the competent authority. All of these are to strengthen cross-compliance, subject to routine full inspections and audits, multiple in course of year. What about the Dutch processing at sea, operating under the same common plan? Flow scales? No. CCTV? No. Image retention for 6 months? No. Sampling under camera? No. Cross-compliance? No. Subject to inspection by Irish competent authority routinely? No. Subject to any audit while fishing west of Ireland? No. This is just shocking stuff, like, really shocking. Deputy Maxwell talks about seeing it for himself. I mean, I'll never forget the level of CCTV oversight of the weighing scales at the fish factory that I observed in Greencastle, going directly to the SFPA offices. I don't know any business in Ireland that would tolerate that level of intrusion, and they can, unannounced at any time, call in round the back and check to see, you know, for example, how many boxes, or 60 boxes on a trolley, you know, 20 kilos, 1.2 tonne. This isn't rocket science to establish all of this. I mean, it's just bananas. There's no comparison. There's no level playing field with the rest of the EU, and a lot of these vessels are voting with their feet and landing in other European ports. Why would you go through the hassle at Killybegs or wherever? So, like, that's why the committee were so aggrieved when we asked the SFPA, you know, to answer our questions, and they referred to the legislation. The one that really got to me is that when you've been in a court of law and the court of law has thrown it out in the most, you know, they were shocked at how poor the case was, shocked that it ever found its way to court, and they're not accountable. Under the law, they're not accountable to this committee. So all I want to know, Minister, is, as far as you understand, is there a review? So wherever the SFPA go to court and the case is thrown out, is there a review? Are there any lessons learned? I mean, is there anybody independently? And the other thing, like, if you look at a lot of authorities in Ireland that enforce the law, they're accountable to another independent body. You know, how can it be that we've given the SFPA such incredible powers, way beyond any other agency of similar responsibility in Europe, and there's no oversight of them? There's no independent oversight. So just to get a sense of that for now, I've got a few other questions too.
Thanks very much, Deputy, and appreciate your questioning. So just to the latter point, so the SFPA will carry out the investigation. Ultimately, the decision as to whether or not it goes to court or not is a matter for the DPP. So I'm just setting out the facts as opposed to using it as a method of avoiding the question, which I think we have to be mindful of. So that's as much as the law requires of the SFPA. They put it together. So the oversight in terms of their investigation, if you want, for the want of a better explanation, is the process by where it feeds into the DPP. No different to the Guards. The Guards will carry out an investigation. SFP will carry out an investigation. They'll present a file to the DPP. The DPP will decide whether or not there's enough evidence to take the case further, and then it goes to the court. And you know how that system works. Now, where I suppose I don't want to get into the parallels with the Guards, but we've learned over recent years the importance of having the Guards as not being self-regulating either, and that there are layers above that now exist, whether it be GSOC or there was the Garda Inspectorate there state. I know that has changed. I think it's worth looking at, which is why I have said as part of that review that we have to look at the oversight of the regulatory aspect of it, that it's not just self-regulating. And that's to help the SFPA as well in terms of the discharge of its functions, and to ensure that it's not being misrepresented because it doesn't have that oversight piece. And that's why I sort of suggested that the consultative committee kind of spoke to some extent in the legislation to that, but it doesn't have.
Yeah, can you just on that, Minister, like, the feedback I have on the consultative committee is it's just an information sharing group. That they're not taking on board, as far as we can see, criticism, constructive feedback, considering changes in approach. It's just merely information. You know, you can put it up on your website and you get the same outcome. And
I think that's what I reflected in my opening statement, that it's an information flow.
Yeah.
And we have to look at that, how that may have teeth. But again, I make those comments as thoughts rather than direction, because I do want the process that I've I'm establishing to be independent and to be best practice, and to look at how similar approaches are taking both at European level, but also we're learning more about regulatory function, whether it be we have it here already in the CRU and ComReg and all those, as to how we manage that better. And I mean, within other departments, it's seeing that there are certain gaps in a self-regulating regulatory environment. We had it in the financial services side, so there's room for improvement, but that's not a criticism of the SFPA, it's of the legislation, and I think that's where we need to.
We may get an opportunity for second round. Deputy Scanlon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, and your officials for being here. Just following on from Senator Boyle's comments, a skipper goes out to sea and he puts out his nets and he catches, he hopes to have a good catch, and he comes back into port then. Has that skipper any way of weighing the fish that he has caught on the boat before he comes back into port?
I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is, I mean, it'll be based on the volume of space that's on the boat, etc. The weighing from the authority's perspective is done in a number of ways. It's either done or can be required by the SFPA to be done as the fish come off the boat. The process requires it to be done again in the factory anyway. So the fish get taken by truck to the factory. They're processed through very sophisticated systems that count and weigh and get all of that right. So there's a number of steps to establishing what's on board. The issue that seems to arise is where a skipper is expected to do not so much an estimation of the weight, but an estimation of what he has or she has on board by doing a dip into the tanks, bringing up a sample and establishing if there's a bycatch, if there's a mixture, if they're out fishing for one particular species and you have a mixture of the other. So if there's 8 of one particular species and 2 of the other in the first capture, that then is meant to be extrapolated across the entirety of the catch, which could be very large in tonnage. And there's sanction if you get that wrong. No willful act on behalf of the skipper or its team, but because it's very hard to do by just doing a small dip or a small sample.
That would be a very unscientific way of measuring the weight of the catch. And then the fisherman, the fish goes into the factory or wherever, it's then weighed, and if it's overweight by 10%, there can be a criminal conviction on that person.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that's the issue, or one of the issues certainly, that seems to be that seems to require further investigation, and that's what I want to do in terms of evaluating the law as it currently stands, to establish what the best way to address the necessity to establish what's on board. And it seems that the the relatively archaic method of guesstimating is now superseded, particularly with the systems that are now in place at the factories. And I think that's why I want a group to evaluate that and see if it's as necessary as it was, or if it's fit for purpose across all the space.
I definitely would certainly welcome that happening. Minister, you state in your report the SFPA has embarked on an ambitious programme of digitisation and will implement new digital inspection service in 2026 and will continue to develop new resources to meet requirements under the revised control regulation. How is that going to work? Is this a new measurement of checking the number of fish that comes in, or the weight of the fish, or what's proposed there?
Well, there's a new control regulation coming in, but obviously we want to work with the industry as well as ensuring that it meets the standards. So there's the control regulation coming from, which is a European one, and we're working towards the implementation of that. So we can have maybe a debate on that particular regulation here again in more detail.
Okay. Because there seems to be a feeling out there that these foreign vessels are getting away with murder and the local fishermen seem to be very strictly controlled. That's the feeling that I get listening to fishermen.
Well, it is expected that member states where boats steam through what we consider Irish waters but are referred to as European waters, where they have a certain entitlement to catch fish in those waters, the expectation is that when they return to their ports of origin, that the same regulations would be there and consistent with EU rules and regulations. But it's also worth noting that not all Irish boats land fish to Irish ports or indeed to European ports. It is permissible for some Irish boats, if they catch fish closer to Norway, to land fish in Norway. Now, I've heard some, again, anecdotal information that some would have concerns about that. I haven't seen anything specific on it. Some would also raise issues in relation to landings in other third countries, parts of the UK, etc. So, comments get made about that all the time. The veracity of it, I can't speak to.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Gurmagat, Deputy Scanlon. Next is Deputy Gallagher.
Thank you.
Shachnamed.
Currently, Councillor, being shown you, Concession, a quarter an hour, modularly, na fibana ata Chinskan, Hiskrata, because the Sul of the Commission of the Gulioraku, Rachel, Amahanshaw. When we met with the Sea Fisheries Authority back here in November, I left with the impression that it was beneath the Sea Fisheries executives to come in here and to be questioned, totally infra-dig, that questions should be asked by us. We who were elected by the people to represent them, and in this case to represent the industry, rather than to scrutinise the actions of that committee. We have a very reduced quota this year, and we should be trying to attract other vessels from other countries into Ireland and to sell their fish there. But the reputation of the SFPA has gone ahead, and those vessels, whether they be Northern Ireland, whether they be Norwegian, or wherever they come from, they won't come because of the reputation. And they're not looking for anything other than fair play, that they would be treated in a fair way, as they would in their own country, or indeed any of the other European countries. How we can justify having a common fisheries policy, and as far as the performance of the SA is concerned, totally different. The number of cameras, I would just very quickly to tell you that, and I was in Marine with the same responsibilities as Minister Dooley in 2004 to 2006, and I saw the ludicrousness of all of this. And I took the officials with me to Europe to meet Commissioner Borg, outlined for him what I felt should be done, invited him to Killybegs Seafoods, where we saw the principle of it there. And afterwards, he agreed it was wrong. And when I was going to Europe, I was advised by the officials that I was going too far, looking for weighing in factories, whether it be herring, mackerel, or blue whiting. We said, no, just go for one of them, because you won't get the three. I said, I'm going for all, because the same principle. And Commissioner Borg agreed to that. And the only stipulation was that they could not come from outside 40 kilometres. And by the 40 kilometres, that covered Rathmullen, where there were vast landings that time, Burton Port and Kincashla. And it worked well. And I believe, Minister, now there's a responsibility to revert to that system. And now we should be trying to ensure that all of the fish that have been landed are landed for human consumption. But as was pointed out by colleagues, if they're weighed on the pier and they're going out to ambient temperature and back in again, it just doesn't work. I think Senator Boyle put it well. You're throwing Lego there, or you have different colours of balls, and you're supposed to guesstimate what's in that basket. And that is factual as far as they're concerned. And if you can't guess that properly, then you're committing. Now, I'll remind you that you voted together with myself, because I laid out on it the penalty points. And there was some question, I think you mentioned, well, about the law. But the penalty points one is ludicrous. Even at this stage, it has to be changed. If you are going down the road and you get stopped by the Gardaí and you're exceeding the limit, or if you believe you're not, you can go to a court. But with the penalty points, if you're proven to be right, the penalty points are still on your licence. So all that is to be changed. Now, I'd be anxious to have your view on the evaluation that and I welcome that. They're going to look at the evaluation, and I would like to think that you would have expertise on that, that those would visit every single factory and see at first hand the way it operates and the necessity to changes. Deputy McLaughlin has outlined very clearly about the number of cameras and the hours that are to be held over for 6 months, or 370,000 hours. So time doesn't permit me, and I don't have it because he has made it very clear. Can I ask you about the port listing? And I have tried on numerous occasions to have that raised on topicals. Now, I had to go home early one day when it was up, but I hope I'm not penalised because of that. But sorry?
You might get penalty points on that.
So, you know, we should be doing something about this. And I do believe that it's not happening quickly enough. And in other countries, that's happening much, much more quickly. And something will have to be done there. So to give you an opportunity to respond, I leave it at that, and hopefully, Chairman, I might get a second round. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy. You've raised this point with me consistently. So you wanted a sort of a more involved view in terms of the evaluation. So the kind of skill sets that I think should be on it, but I'm not entirely wedded to this, but I'd certainly take the views of the committee. But I think we need legal in the first instance. I think we need navigational and oceanic knowledge as well, understanding the law of the sea, and I think enforcement under those general headings. And I'm conscious that we've got to find parallels, as was the case previously, for people kind of outside the specifics of the fishing in the SFPA sector, but where we can look at parallels and to drive that. You raised the issue about the designation of the port, or the derogation that would be sought to exclude the port based on the systems that are now in place. And I have asked the department to advance that, and I hope to be able to come back to the committee relatively quickly with a kind of a workflow or a time frame or an action plan as to what's involved in making that happen. And it's a stated decision of mine that I want this done, but it's how quickly we can get it done, recognising the elements that still have to be addressed. But I'll continue to keep the committee informed on that as we make progress.
Have you decided in your own mind what expertise you will have on the evaluation committee that you hope to appoint?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So legal, I think probably somebody at senior council level, at least. I think there needs to be somebody with oceanic experience, navigational, military perhaps, that would understand that area, and then the enforcement, and I'm thinking of, you know, a parallel in some other area that would look at that. So that's familiar with the kind of challenges that are faced, and I would also expect the input of the committee, and whether that's through the report, that the rapporteur's report that Deputy McLaughlin is putting together on behalf of the committee, could be a very useful input into that. But it's to take the issues that have been risen, and that's why, with the terms of reference, my intention would be to come back to you with the terms of reference that we'll prepare, and seek your input. Obviously, I'll have to take that decision at the end of the day, but I don't want to do it at the exclusion of yourself. So I'll be open to at least listening to the thoughts that you might have on that.
Before the summer recess?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman.
Ar at cúpla ceisna gom féin art an ábhar so just nó míad an dara round. The first one relates to the SFPA budget and what proportion of that budget, if any, comes from the European Union.
I'd have to come back to you directly on that, Chairman. If you raised that with me last week, I'd have had the file on that, but I'll come back to you on that.
But would it be fair to say that a portion of its budget comes from the European Union under MFAF?
It may come under MFAF. I don't have the percentages with you. There is some money coming from MFAF, but I'll come back to you with the specifics on it.
And I guess following on from that, and we take it that there is some MFAF funding going into the budget, is that for specific programmes?
I think it's 800, just that I have here, so 21 to 26, 800,000 in 2026 comes under the MFAF subhead here. In 2024, that was 1.56 million, and back in 21 it was 1.6, so it seems to be reducing. It was 800 in 2025 as well. So,
I guess then the political question: does it make sense that, and is there perhaps a potential conflict of interest where the agency of this state tasked with policing both Irish and EU flagged and indeed third country vessels operating in our waters is part funded and dependent on the European Union for a part of its budget? And does that perhaps colour even or give the possibility that it might colour its approach to EU flagged vessels?
no, because the funding provided to the SFPA comes from the department. So you asked for the breakdown in relation to the funding that comes from MFAF. That's departmental and provided, as we do in the vote, of monies directly to the SFPA. So they're agnostic to the source of the funding. Their guiding principle is the 2006 Act, and they must follow the Act. So I wouldn't have any concerns whatsoever about the source of the funding.
Are you aware of any other enforcement agency attached to any other department of government that has some of its budget funded by the European Union?
I'm not aware, but I'm happy to check it out. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if quite a number of others might source certain funds from the European Union where their role involves matters of a wider European context.
Okay. Thank you. Is it possible for a fisherman to be subject to both an administrative and a criminal sanction for the same offence currently?
I don't know of the specifics of each of the offences, but I'll happily try and get that information.
My understanding, and I'm open to correction, but my understanding is that both approaches are open and can be applied simultaneously.
Yeah, the point system operates separately to the criminal sanctions system. So that's the points would be more administrative in that nature, but yes is the information that I have. Yeah.
And I would wager that is out of kilter with any other system of enforcement for any other sector in the state, that there are both criminal and administrative sanctions applied by the same body side by side on foot of the same investigation. Half of at-sea inspections are inspections.
Sorry,
half of at-sea inspections carried out by the SFPA are conducted on Irish vessels, Irish fishing vessels. Again, I would wager that an awful lot more of the fishing activity carried out by vessels in our EEZ are carried out not by Irish vessels. Certainly, Irish vessels have much less than half of the quota in those waters. Do you think that it is a fair interpretation of that discrepancy, that there is a disproportionate amount of at-sea inspections carried out on Irish vessels than other EU vessels?
You're asking me now to sort of do, and I wouldn't be in a position to do it, to do a full analysis of the activities of the SFPA in terms of their calculation of risk, etc. And that's why I think that kind of oversight is for a body that's independent of the Minister If it can't be done through the committee, and I think that could be done through the committee, quite frankly, I think, unless there's some reason that I just can't bring to mind, but I think that's the kind of discussion that the committee should be having with the SFPA in terms of its overall operational activity in a general way rather than a specific case-by-case basis.
Just based on your response there, it strikes me, and I don't know if you're suggesting this, but what I heard is that there may be a risk profile that SFPA uses to decide what vessels it is going to carry out inspections of at sea, and if 50% or more of those vessels are Irish, and I think without having the figures in front of you or me, I think we can assume that significantly a much larger percentage of vessels in our EEZ currently fishing are not Irish flagged vessels. Does the SFPA consider that there is a greater risk of overfishing by Irish vessels, because that would lead them to disproportionately target them for at-sea inspections? Because, I mean, I would like to see what that is based on.
Yeah, and again, I can't answer that, and it's not that I don't want to, but I just don't have that information, nor I wouldn't rightfully have it, nor shouldn't, because that's the function of the SFPA under the legislation to address the operational matters. So I think in terms of whatever risk profiling the SFPA, because they obviously have to manage their activities, they can't board every vessel, they can't check every vessel, so they'll have some methodology of deciding what they board, when they board, and how they manage that. That should be for them, and I think, subject to correction, but I would think that that's something that they could easily provide to the committee in terms of their overall activities. Well, maybe it's something you could write to them and seek their view on.
I think we may need to ask you to support us in that, because our experience in this committee of getting answers from the SFPA hasn't been fantastic, to put it very diplomatically. But it is concerning that there doesn't seem to be a level of transparency or oversight, as far as I can see it, in terms of the risk profiling by the SFPA, because it does lead, when there isn't that transparency piece, it does allow any agency or people operating within an agency to select a risk profile that it might be a matter of low-hanging fruit. It might be, well, we'll board them because they're easiest to board. It costs us less resources to board those because perhaps they're fishing closer to shore. There is less need for administrative work to take place, be it translation of documents, be it engagement with other fisheries protection. So I just think we need to be careful on that. And then a very final question, Minister, is if you were designing a system from scratch, not the system that we have at the moment, how would you envisage accountability, transparency, and answerability being baked into that system if you were creating a sea fisheries protection system from scratch for this state?
Yeah, I suppose I don't want to create false hope or expectation. The system we have is what we currently have, and I'm more interested in how we move from what was the architecture of what was there in 2006 and deemed necessary in 2006, how we bring that forward to today's environment to address the challenges which for sure exist, which have probably changed in nature and character from then, in terms of the fishing activities.
Specifically on the transparency, the accountability piece, because that, I think that's where a lot of this issue resides. We all accept that there has to be sea fisheries protection, but it's how that's accountable.
And I hope you'll understand me here, Chairman, and I'm not being evasive. I don't want to be prescriptive at this stage, because I'm mindful that I want to give the committee an input into this. I'm mindful that I will be appointing some external independent people to do this work, and then I'll have to review that. So I want to get the best possible input, taking into consideration all the aspects of it, and I'm in the process, or we will begin a process shortly to define the terms of reference of that work. So I don't want to second guess what the outcome might be, or be prescriptive at all at this stage, other than that I'm cognizant of the issues and I want to find a resolution.
Thank you, Minister. We're on to our second round, agus an tacht Padraig McLaughlin.
Gur Magat.
No mé de hachta.
Okay, so a couple of questions. In your opening statement, you talk about this review related to the EU Fisheries Control Regulation, but you say it is not envisioned that there will be a full-scale review now of the original legislation. Now, our committee will conclude our work, I would imagine, in April. And obviously our committee will sign off on the final report. I just want to get an assurance, Minister, that you will factor in our report and recommendations into your own review, so that you would take that on board. The second question I have then for you is, so in June of this year, Ireland needs to prepare and lodge a new national control plan. So that'll be in terms of the next 10 years for the catching and processing sector. So just want to clarify, is it you yourself, Minister, that lodges this plan? And then if it is yourself, Minister, it's critical that that plan includes the full restoration of in-factory weighing. So it's critical that all the issues that we have raised, there will be the Fish Producers and Exporters Association are coming before this committee in a few weeks' time in a dedicated session. So I would ask you to pay attention, close attention to the transcript of that session in a number of weeks' time. But I just want to get a sense, so to recap again, will you give us a commitment today that the report and recommendations we bring forward in April will be factored into this review that you're carrying out? And you have said that that may well lead to amendments and changes to the original legislation. And then secondly, is it you that's going to be submitting this control plan? And will you ensure that the lessons, the terrible experience that has had such an impact on our industry, that these things are changed for the next 10 years?
Thanks very much. Yes, Deputy, I'm happy to engage with the committee and the report that you produce, and it's timely if it's to be completed in April, that it would form a significant input into the group that I'll establish to carry out the review on the control plan. My understanding is the last time that I think it was agreed between the Commission and the SFPA, because there were some outstanding issues that I understand sort of predated that, that had to be addressed. I'll establish for you, and I'll come back as to the role that I as Minister can play, or the committee can play, and would be happy to get the input from the committee in advance of the submission of that control plan. So I'll establish what the role of the Minister is in that regard, and as to the input that I can make. But I think you'll see what I'm trying to do is engage more fully here with all sectors to try to ensure that they're fit for purpose now, in light of the significant changes in the sector, the character and the nature of it, but also the technological advances that have come into play.
It strikes me that
and you mentioned one other thing, which I just sound-wise, about some committee or some event that was taking place that you wanted me to look at the.
Yeah, apologies. So the Fish Producers and Exporters Association will be coming before the committee, I think, in about, because of recess and so on, about 3 weeks' time, I think, roughly. So if you could just note, that's going to be a very important session, particularly in terms of the control plan that you'll be drafting. You know, if it is yourself, Minister, that signs off on it, it'd be particularly important to pay attention to that session in 3 weeks' time.
It's the organisation led by Mr. O'Donnell, is it?
That's Brendan Byrne is
Brendan Byrne, the
Fish Producers and Exporters, and it will be Brendan Byrne who'll be before the committee on his own, representing the producers and the factories across the state. So I think that's a particular area of concern that we have. It's just ludicrous. It's ludicrous the level. I mean, you've heard evidence from all the members here today around that. So I suppose to recap.
Yeah, and I think just maybe to make a point on that, which would be very useful, is when you've had your deliberations on that you might submit to the department, to myself, your thoughts and views on the deposition of Mr. Byrne on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So just to recap, we will obviously get the report and recommendations to you, I would imagine, sometime in April. And then if you could please factor it into A, your review, and B, your deliberations in terms of the control. But we'll re-engage with you at that point.
Okay,
thanks. That's enough.
Yeah. Next we have on Tacht Gallagher. Cuig no méid a hachta.
Minister, I'm pleased that there will be an opportunity to feed the report, which Deputy McLaughlin will do, into those who will be responsible for the evaluation of 2026. But I just have to impress upon you, Minister, the urgency of fast-tracking this, because if it's going to go with the same snail's pace as the ports, and that's gone on for far too long. And so you have a number of items. You have to deal with the port, you have to deal with the evaluation of the 2006 and their priority. So I would hope, and I'm just looking ahead, that whoever is responsible for this would ensure that Irish fishermen, and they have to go in there with a very clear view. There might be terms of reference, but there should be a very clear view that no longer should Irish fishermen be treated as criminals for minor offences. For minor offences. And even if those minor offences are overturned in the courts, they're still criminals. And remember, if our people and families of those are trying to visit other countries and require visas, they won't get them in the technological age that we're living in. All of that information. So I just wonder, would you be thinking of appointing someone from this committee to that evaluation committee? And if you are, maybe that's no, or it mightn't be the political thing to do, the fact that we will have an input in advance. But I would hopefully, in your terms of reference, that this committee would have an opportunity to meet with the evaluation committee to express our strongly held views.
Just on your latter point, I think it's not to suggest there isn't expertise in here. There's a lot of expertise in here, but I think this is to look at the law and its application and its operation, and to establish what it is we're now protecting and how we're doing it. So it's an evaluation of the law, and I suppose where we get our slice of that is if there's to be any amendments to the law at a later stage, that they would be discussed here. So I'm not so sure that we'd be taking people from within the Oireachtas. There will be a report that will come back to us, which I'll bring to this committee in due course for its evaluation, and that's kind of where I see that happening. And I again recognise your frustration about the pace of which we're progressing on the designation issue, and we'll work on that. Thank you.
Can I just have a minute? Can I just say to you, Chairman, if it comes to the stage of checking in factories, the factories are quite open to putting your officials in there 7 or 24 by 365 days if it's necessary. And they have no difficulty with that. Why? Because everything they're doing is above board, and all they want to ensure is they can have the tonnage of the fish evaluated in the exact one. Whereas the basket one, I think you realise that when you visited yourself today, that was a no-brainer to do that. And that's something that doesn't come from Europe. That's something that's decided here. So I wish you well, and hopefully the next time you're here, you will have progressed all of these, Minister.
That'll be all dependent on how much time you give me. You have me in here nearly every week, so give me a couple of months and we'll see how we go. But thank you, no, I appreciate that.
Don't forget the factories are open to having them in 265 days.
I know, and that has been mentioned. I have to be conscious too that in terms of our workforce planning, that may be arduous in terms of the timing, etc., and the cost of that. So whilst it's and I accept it, it shows the bona fides of the processors. I'm just more interested in seeing how we can sweat the technological asset, recognising that it can be audited very easily. Because Minister Hayden did mention to me that when he was in one of the facilities recently in Killybegs, he was observing the download of certain data that had been stored, together with, perhaps you were there, Senator Boyle was there.
For the 30 seconds, and let me be facetious, that the quotas are so low now, you can nearly weigh them all on an old average scales.
I know.
Okay, thanks, Minister.
Thank you.
Gur mágad a hachta agus a ara agus an céad an eile ná an tacht ward. Cuig nó méid a hachta.
I just want to ask you a question regarding the role of the Navy in the Irish sea fisheries protection. So are you satisfied that they're appropriately resourced to protect Irish water against illegal fishing by vessels from other countries?
I would have to come back to you on that. No, it hasn't been raised with me by the Navy or the SFPA that there's been a shortage of resources in terms of doing their work. That has never been raised as an issue directly with me, but I'm happy to ask the question from the Navy.
Yeah, that's me.
Agad a hachta agus an Shanador Boyle.
No, just Minister, on the port listings, you did a talk about a couple of times, and I mean, to say they're slow would be putting it at a snail's pace. I see that Denmark and Latvia already have approved. Can you see the time frame, and like, will we get this approved, April, May, or what's taking so long? I mean, we seem to have all the CCTV in the world. And Killybegs, you can't really walk down the street, but you're on a camera. So why is it taking so long for this to be put out there?
Yeah. I have asked our team to put together a plan for the listing and the work that has to be done. I know there are a number of outstanding items, and what I will try to do insofar as I can is get a timeline on that implementation. There is already somebody in the department who has responsibility or has been assigned responsibility in this regard. I don't have an update at the moment in terms of what the timing on it, so I don't want to say to you it'll be April or May until such time as I can be definitive as to the work that has to be done, what's done, what has yet to be done, and then what the process is to get the approval on that. But I'll come back to you on it in due course.
Right, and well, maybe this is one you can't answer either. Like, where other in Europe does it take 14 documents to take a lorry 300 yards up the road?
Again, I'm not an expert on all landings elsewhere, but I certainly believe that we need to find a better way to do business than what currently is the case in Killybegs.
Yeah. And Deputy Pat the Cope Galler did say it here, and that's what I'm getting from the factories in Killybegs. They are more than welcome to welcome the SFPA officers and do their inspections there 24/7. They have nothing to hide, and they feel it's the best way. I mean, at the minute, skippers are been drawn to court for over a bycatch that is a guesstimate. When you go to the factory, every tail is weighed, every gram is weighed. That's the place where the SFPA should be, and they get their final figure there, and the figure is 100% correct. And I really do see, it's very inflexible here. It's either you take it or you don't, or we'll pull your licence. And I mean, at the end of the day, these factories are employing people. And at the end of the day, if there wasn't fish coming into Killybegs, there'd be nobody employed. The coastal communities is dying the way they are with quota cuts. Unless you're up there to be in the heart of it, you don't see it. All weekend I seen it, I've heard it. You know, what's going on is totally wrong. And I mean, we should be welcoming and trying to welcome other foreign vessels in that can try and enhance employment. Now, it would be far better if it was Irish. It should be Irish. But I mean, if we have to work with foreign vessels, we should have to work with them, you know. But as my colleagues see here, there is people that won't come to Killybegs because of what's going on in Killybegs and how controlled it is. So there has to be a bit of give and take here, you know, there really has. You know, we can't afford to be falling out with people that was willing to land fish in Killybegs because they create employment.
Well, I'm very conscious what you say, Senator, and I've had the pleasure of being in Killybegs on a number of occasions with yourself and Deputy Pat the Cope and others, McLaughlin and Deputies McLaughlin and Ward as well, and others. I'm very clear that there's a lot of concerns about the 2006 Act, and that's why we are establishing an evaluation of the Act to address those exact issues, give clarity to the SFPA in terms of where the legislation now stands. And I'm conscious that the technological advances are significant, coupled with very significant advances in AI in the last 12 to 18 months. I just think it is prudent now to do that evaluation for a couple of reasons. As Deputy Pat the Cope has already said, we're in a much more challenged environment. We have had to establish a task force to address the loss of fishing effort, which we're thankful to Michael Berkery for taking on that role. That work is underway. That's a challenge to all of us to try to reorient the state system to support the fishing sector during what will be a difficult transitionary period until stocks recover. So we need to see how the control measures meet the objectives that are set out in the law, but to do so in a way that is consistent with best practice and is consistent with the systems that are operational in other countries. Because I am absolutely taken by the fact that there are opportunities, particularly of states that are boats from other member states who have quota allocation in waters close to Ireland, and for which, if they were to come ashore at Killybegs, would provide meaningful income and employment for people in the factories there from a processing perspective. I think we would. That's why we want the alignment, so that it's not more restrictive than it might be elsewhere. So we do need to look at that, and I think the review is the place to do that. But that's not to cast any aspersions wider than just the legislation rather than anything else.
Deputy Cowell, 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, and I too would like to welcome our guests today. And we've been previously informed here about that there are way more inspections of Irish trawlers than foreign trawlers, and that makes, if that is the case, that makes no sense at all. And you know, in my opinion, and I believe we should be coming down very hard on any trawlers that enter our waters from outside this country. And I think it's fair to say that our waters have been raped enough by factory ships and foreign trawlers over the years, and indeed in quota cuts, etc. In regards to our processing plants, I would just like to say, you know, I've seen a number of these plants in my own county, especially, in the very high standards that are there, and the quality of the work, and indeed the produce. And Minister, I'm aware that you have seen a lot of them in Kerry, and indeed I'd say at this stage probably in every county in the country. But you know, that is something we should be very, very proud of. And like you know, I've seen them in, you know, Renard and Carsween, in my own parish at Glenbeigh, Dingle and Kimere, etc. And as I said, you know, the quality of Irish fish and the way it's produced and the way it's packaged and marketed is exemplary. And just one or two quick questions. In regards to the task force, has it commenced its work? And when do we expect the report to be ready? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Just to, and you have, and thank you for raising the issue of the fish processors right around Ireland, and I have had an opportunity to visit some, not as many as I'd like, but I've been at some in your constituency, and you and I last summer were in Renard, where we met Quinlan's, small, very effective operator, producer and provider to restaurants, and their own restaurants have their own restaurants as well, which is really where we want to see small scale fishing connected to the local community and having a benefit in a coastal community. So they've effectively taken out the larger middlemen, if you want, or women, and that's where we can enhance and grow the return to the coastal communities. That's something that, and I've spoken to BIM about, is something I'm very, very clear and very, very interested in. We have larger scale too, which of course are important, who unfortunately are no longer able to source enough fish in Ireland, bring fish from abroad, sometimes re-export it into large multiples, and that's good employment business too. And I know sometimes they're reflected on negatively perhaps by some of our fishermen, and I can understand why they would. But it's providing employment, and in lots of cases providing employment in the coastal communities as well, because we don't have the fish resource, we don't have the fish source here anymore. But I'm mindful that that whole ecosystem is challenged because of the reduction in quota as a result of the drop in the stock of species around Ireland. So even on Friday, you and I were in Dingle. We finished up late into the evening, and I had the pleasure of attending one of the very many fish restaurants in Dingle, which I hadn't been to before. I think it has opened since there, called the Fish Box. And I was informed that the family that own it have a trawler. Is it the name of the family just isn't Flaherty's or something? But a wonderful facility. But one of the unique selling points on it was full, like lots of the restaurants in Kerry. I have been in many of them before, so I don't want to single out one, but it was a new one to me, where they're bringing the fish themselves from their own boat, processing it and selling it in the shop, and that's wonderful to see as well. You talked then about the task force. It's up and running. It had its first meeting about almost 4 weeks ago. There's another meeting, I think, on the 22nd or the 23rd of this month. The chairman has written, as I understand it, to the stakeholders who were at that meeting, has asked them to make submissions to him. He will have further engagement on my understanding is a sector by sector basis with each of the areas, because they've all different needs and expectations. And the plan is to have a draft report, I think by the end of May, maybe early June, with a final report by the end of June. It's a lot of work to get done in a short period of time, but I know the chairman is driving ahead with it, and I'm confident that we'll be there on time. It involves a multiplicity of state agencies in terms of a response, so not all of it will necessarily be provided for through our department. The Department of Social Welfare will be in there, the Department of Finance are in there, the Department of Public Expenditure have my understanding is that they will provide somebody in due course. We have BIM, Board BIA, the Department of Enterprise Tourism and Employment. So there's a number of other state agencies. That may not be an exhaustive list, but we can provide that to the committee. And I would expect to be back before the committee to discuss that report in due course.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, I just have one question I want to put to you, Minister, and it's in regards to the maritime security strategy that was announced last week. And look, my criticisms have been ventilated at this point, that another strategy when we have repeated delays in terms of investing in our defence forces and the security of the state, and we have difficulty putting our naval resources to sea. But where it really missed a trick, and I think this committee needs to take a strong view on this, is not recognising that the biggest maritime resource that we have at our disposal is our fishing stocks. And the biggest security imperative that we as a state have, this nation has at sea, is the protection of our fishery stocks. And I think where there may well be other threats, there may be future threats that we haven't considered. There may be threats from state and non-state actors, certainly in terms of the use of our seas for the transportation of contraband and drugs and all the rest. There is a need to be very serious about maritime security. I just think that the fact that fisheries hasn't played a very central role in that, and much of the talk has been about, we'll say, defence issues relating to defence and foreign affairs. I just think that government has missed a trick on that. And I'd be interested to hear your views on it, what role you as Minister with responsibility for fisheries will have in terms of stewarding that resource, and following on from a question that was put earlier by Deputy Ward, if you feel that additional capacity in our naval service and defence forces and an additional technological capacity in terms of drones and the rest of it would assist us in monitoring overfishing by EU member states and indeed third country flagged fishing vessels in our waters.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I think my understanding is that the strategy is very much focused on the defence piece, as you say. Of course, there will be collaboration between us and the Defence Forces, as there is anyway. There's a service level agreement between the SFPA and the Navy in relation to the enforcement, which was one of the questions that was raised earlier. So I think those are established principles that already exist in terms of defending our interests in terms of our fishing stocks. Where this document, or where this strategy is desirous, I think, to go, is to ensure that our undersea cables in the first instance, our underseas interconnectors, whether it be electricity or gas, of which there's two on the gas side, and then there's the connection from the Corrib field, which is a resource that's reducing, but the other two are strong. We have all those communications, those communication cables that go connect us, but importantly as well, connect parts of Europe through to the United States. So it's largely in that, but look, it's a whole of government approach, and it's very much building on what was there, but broadening it and widening it, and developing a strategy around investing in key assets, key infrastructure that's required, primary radar, etc. But again, it might be useful for the committee to have the Minister with responsibility, particularly the Minister for Defence, to come before the committee for a conversation about that, or with notice. I'll happily come back in consultation with the Department of Defence and address that in the future.
Thank you. And Minister, I appreciate that it's not your portfolio, but there
is crossover, and I think you've rightly identified.
I think it warrants stating here that totally understand. I think all of us do the need for us, from a strategic point of view, to ensure the security of energy and communications infrastructure undersea. But in a growing global uncertainty, food sovereignty and food security is crucially important, and we have massive stock of protein at our disposal in the seas around our island, and I think that needs to be a huge part of our security considerations as a state. But that said, that's just a point I think that needs to be ventilated to this committee. There's no further questions, so on behalf of the committee, Minister, I want to thank you. Gan buchas Earth agus de ifigig, as fe os ar gor an jov, con ceisna a ragart an over. So Neil Tilla le play agus tá an criniú seo an cuiste ar athló go dtí an ceathrú lás fiche de bhí mórta fiche sé ige héindig a chlog. As there's no further matters for discussion, today's meeting of the Joint Committee stands adjourned until the 24th of March 2026 at 11 a.m. Cormain Maguf.